Hi everyone. So, I think I might be live. I'm not entirely sure. I have got absolutely no clue what I'm doing. So, you'll need to bear with me. But I suddenly was overcome with the impulse to just give it a go and see what happens if I actually hit go live on my channel. And yeah, so here I am. So, I'm going to see if I can open up the chat. Oh, I can see myself, and there seems to be a time delay. That's probably a good thing. Um, Hi, Christy. Hi, Supportive Tarot. And thank you for being here. That's a good sign. So there are people in the chat room. I'm here. 3 people are watching. So we're off to a good start. So yeah, so today I posted a couple of videos that were, hi Robin, that were about the fact that I had reached 1,000 subscribers, which was just really exciting for me. And I also did the draw for my Why Do You Tarot tag, and I thought actually it'd be nice to come on and do a video, which I actually was planning to record later on in the week. And it was kind of a bit of a response video to a couple of videos that I'd watched earlier this week, one from Anya Orga and one from Katie Flowers, which were about their cornerstone spiritual practices. And I thought, well, that's a great topic for a video, and so I thought, well, I'm going to film that, so why not do this live, and let's see if other people would like to join in with their cornerstone spiritual practices. And actually the topic I'm using for this is actually spiritual self-care, because I think for a number of reasons the idea of self-care and looking after our spirits in the most holistic and empowering way possible has been in my mind a bit over the last few days, and I thought it would be good to share with you some of my thoughts on that. So hopefully you can hear me, and hopefully I can catch up with you all on chat. I haven't actually got anyone here. Hi Alfina. Hi Farah. I haven't got anyone here who's doing the kind of moderating in the chat room, so you'll have to bear with me. I'll try and look at the chat room and speak to you at the same time, but bear with me if it takes a bit longer for me to get to you than it would normally. So if I miss anything, what I'll do is I'll try and go back through the chat afterwards, and I'll pick up any questions I miss in any future video that I might do on this topic. And I am planning to do a few more videos actually on this topic, because the subject of spiritual self-care is something that's really of interest to me, partly because my work as a coach means that I spend a lot of time helping people look at how they can look after themselves in a psychological sense and in a motivational sense, and in a spiritual sense. And it's probably worth saying that from my point of view, spiritual and spirituality really uncovers everything. So I don't really delineate between, you know, we often talk about mind, body and spirit, don't we? Hi Crystal, or Andrea. I know that you're not really called Crystal, but that's your channel name. So in case anyone else doesn't know, Crystal Irama, it's Andrea. So welcome, nice to see you here. Yeah, so in my coaching work, a lot of the time is spent looking at mind, body, spirit stuff. But as I often say to my coaching clients, sometimes we can draw artificial lines between those things as though they're different, but they're not really different. To me, the way that we look after ourselves physically has a really important impact on the way that we then, you know, feel internally, emotionally, and the way that we relate to others, and all of that has a big impact on our own spiritual health. So I also tend to think along the lines that it's not so much that we are bodies that have got spirits within them. I know that's one of the kind of models that is often used in the spiritual community. But for me, I tend to think more that I am a spiritual being that has a body, but really also I have a whole set of other experiences that come into my life. And if you look at some of the non-dualist teachers and Buddhist teachers and so on, certainly some that I've been influenced by, it's even possible to think that it's not so much that we are in the world, it's perhaps a bit more that the world is in us. And therefore the way that we look at the world and the way that we perceive the world and the choices we make about how we perceive the world, we have a lot of influence over that. We have a lot of power over that, and we have a lot of choices that we can make to improve our lives and to improve the lives of other people as well, in terms of how we relate to them and how we respond to them. when they're behaving in either healthy or unhealthy ways. So there's a lot that we could say about that. Hi Kay, but really what I'd like to do is just say a little bit about my spiritual self-care practice, and I'd love to hear from you about yours. So if you are in the chat room now and you'd like to share with us what some of your spiritual self-care practices are, please do. It would be great to hear. And if you're watching this video later on down the line, then you know, what we can do is we can, you know, perhaps pick up some of your hints and tips in the comments below. And I've just seen a comment from Althina's Tarot Journey. I see that the body is the manifestation of spirit. Yes, exactly. That's exactly how I see it. And I think really that everything is the manifestation of spirit. And that's a really empowering way of looking at things, I find, because what it allows me to do is to remind myself that anything that happens to me and anything that happens in my life, anything that happens in my world, including the things that are not so nice and some of the things that maybe will upset me or be difficult for me, are all part of my spirit's journey, if you like. They're all spiritual experiences. And sometimes we put our spiritual experiences in a little box, don't we? We say, oh, well, it has to look a certain way or feel a certain way to be spiritual. But if we're working on the basis that everything is spiritual, then actually that really opens things up for us. But it also challenges us, because what it does is it puts us in the position then of having to take responsibility for our responses. And that can be quite a difficult thing to do, quite a challenging thing to do. So I see the room is filling up. So hi Celtic Witch, hi Elaine. Nice to see so many people here. I'm very pleased. I actually came on thinking it's quite late in the UK and I've got no idea what time it is in any other part of the world. I know that some places are behind us and some are ahead of us, and you know, it's all times all across the world. But I just didn't realise that anyone would show up, and there's 13 of you already, so I'm really pleased. So in terms of my spiritual self-care practices, so what I'd like to say about that is I've broken this down into 4 different areas and then some subsets. And the first thing I want to talk about, and for me this is one of the most important and fundamental aspects of spiritual self-care, and that is building daily practice. And you know, we could almost leave it there and say that that's it, because everyone's daily practice is going to be different. I did a tarot tag a while ago, which was about AM, PM pagan practices and tarot practices, and loads of people responded to that and had some really good ideas about the kind of things that they would do as their spiritual practices. And yeah, I see Supportive Tarot, you're talking there about practices related to your personal growth, journaling, meditation, yoga, daily draws, absolutely. And yes, Elaine, showing up for yourself, that's exactly it. That for me is what the daily practice is about. It's about showing up for yourself. And Stephen Covey, who wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I actually really recommend to people. It's a kind of business related book. And I know that some people might find it a little bit too businessy and a bit too, you know, get into the boardroom and be tough and, you know, win lots of business. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that might not appeal to everyone. But actually, it's got quite a strong spiritual foundation. And one of the things that he talks about is the idea of the private victory. And for him, the private victory is doing the things that you set out to do first thing in the morning, so your daily practice, whatever that may be, because by doing that, you actually allow yourself then to have built your confidence, so that when you go out into the world, maybe to your job, or when you go out just to deal with whatever you have to deal with during a normal day, you've already done something for yourself, and that puts you in the position of feeling kind of good about yourself. And you know, if the practices are things that support you anyway, the fact that you've done them and the fact that they are supportive practices gives you kind of a double boost. Andrew is saying, Crystal Ram is saying, I must admit it's not my best moment for spiritual self-care. Right now I'm more dealing with a shadow self. Well, that's a really good point. And of course, any daily practice can be about dealing with shadow as well. You know, it's about, the daily practice is always about what's right for you in the moment. So for me, some of the basic things that I like to do, and the reason I see this as a kind of foundational practice, one of the most important things, and I would say probably my absolutely most important spiritual practice of them all, is silence. And for me, sometimes that can be half an hour of silence, just sitting, listening, meditating. Sometimes, if I'm really busy, it's something like 3 seconds of silence, or maybe 3 breaths worth of silence. But I try and get some silence in every day, just to take a moment to myself before the craziness of the world begins. And I had a really interesting experience with silence, actually, and I'll say a bit more about that in a second, because that's one of the main things that I want to talk about. So there's silence, and the other thing that's important for me is my daily workout. Now, I'm somebody who, I'm not naturally athletic, I'm not interested in sport, I was never very good at keep fit and all that kind of stuff, you know, when I was younger. But I also struggled a lot with my weight when I was younger, and in fact I've struggled with my weight all my life. So you know, it's not as though I've got it completely under control ever. But I'm in a position now where I know what to do to eat well and to keep fit. So for me, doing a workout in the morning is really important. And again, I'll say a bit more about that, because that's another of my kind of cornerstones. And then the other thing to say in relation to that is, for me, it's also about not necessarily first thing in the morning, but the kind of the thing that I do to break my fast at any particular time is to have a conscious meal, whether it's breakfast time or lunchtime, of food that nourishes and supports me and meets my requirements of the moment. So that might mean a lettuce leaf and a couple of beans if I'm dieting, or it might be something a bit more substantial if I'm not. But for me, it's about making sure that my first meal of the day is something that sustains me and nourishes me, and also demonstrates to me that I value myself. So it's not just about eating the right food that, you know, healthy eating experts tell you, or the government tells you to eat, or the things you know are good for you. It's about eating consciously and choosing to eat things that are nourishing, because that then is a loving act towards yourself. It's a loving act of self-care towards yourself. So so really the daily practice is part of my cornerstone. Fitness and healthy eating is another part of my cornerstones. Silence is another part of the cornerstones. And then the fourth one, and it's actually a couple of things together, are intention, that's goal setting, using the power of my mind and my spirit and my daily practice, sometimes my perhaps even a magical practice, to set my intention, to set goals, to visualize, to move towards some kind of aim that I may have. And the other side of that is intuition, and for me that's where tarot very much comes into the picture, because that's where I do my listening work, it's where I do my divination work, it's where I contemplate, it's where I reflect, it's where I journal, and that for me is about dropping into my own intuition, and in the scheme of everything that I'm doing in my life at the time, it's about then thinking about, you know, reflecting on that and using that to grow myself. So so maybe to say a little bit more about each of those things, and let me just check the tarot, check the chat room before we go on. So yeah, a couple of you are saying that struggling with meditations, and yeah, Kay, I actually struggle with meditation as well, I have to admit. But Elaine has mentioned using breath and chakra visualization, and it doesn't take long. Yeah, absolutely. I actually find that's very powerful and very useful. One of my favorite meditations is the chakra meditation, and when we get on to talk about the silence side of things, I'll say a bit more about that. But just being able to visualize the chakras and think about what they mean is a really good way of focusing the mind in a meditation. And there are other things that we can do as well. So one of the things I'd like to say a little bit then is the notion of this daily practice in terms of, you know, getting things done that are good for us physically. And a lot of this depends, of course, on, I do it in the morning, but a lot depends on whether you are a morning person or not. And I know that not many people are, or very many people aren't. I'm not particularly a morning person, but I've got to the stage where I know that if I don't do certain things in the morning, like my workout, I won't do them later in the day, or I'll be very unlikely to do them later in the day. So I always try to do my workout in the morning. And one of the ways I've made it interesting for myself, or more interesting, because as I say, I'm not particularly sporty or athletic. So I developed this idea, which I wrote about in my food book, called the 4 elements of fitness. And it's a rather grand way of just talking about different types of fitness, but for me it kind of connects to that spiritual idea of the 4 elements. And so the 4 elements of fitness for me are stamina, and that's the kind of thing where I do exercise that builds my heart and lung capacity, so aerobic activity, occasionally swimming. I don't really jog, I don't run unless somebody's chasing me. So I do step aerobics at home with a video or a DVD, showing my age there, a video. Who still has videos? I don't have a video, well I have got a video player actually I think somewhere, and I've probably got some video cassettes as well, but I do it with a DVD. I do my step aerobics with a DVD, and that gets my heart rate going, and you know, gets the blood pumping and all that kind of stuff, and that's building stamina so that I actually feel kind of you know, fitter. Farah, it takes literally a half hour to wake up. Well, it takes me that long as well, and actually I should have said, I don't want to sound all kind of, you know, holier than thou, because the first thing I do before I do my workout is have a really strong cup of coffee. And actually I should have put this down, I consider coffee, strong black coffee in the morning, to be part of my spiritual self-care process, because mainly because if I don't have it then I can't do anything else because I'm not awake. So once I've had my strong cup of coffee, sometimes 2 of them, I do my fitness, and stamina is one of the 4 elements of fitness that I build. The other one is strength, and so for strength training I lift weights occasionally at home. Again, I don't go to the gym. I'm a bit like Dolly Parton, who once said, she said, I'm particular who I sweat with. And I agree with Dolly, so I don't like going to the gym and being all embarrassed by people seeing me as I'm huffing and puffing. So I do my huffing and puffing at home. I have some weights behind me, I don't know if you can see them, there they are. And I do kind of just some basic strength training in the morning. And that gets me stronger. It helps build my muscle tone, it helps build my bones. And while I'm doing this, I should say that one of the reasons I developed the idea of the 4 elements of fitness is so that when I'm doing these activities, some of which frankly are a bit boring, I think about what they're doing to enhance my life. So as I'm puffing away on the step, when I'm doing my step aerobics DVD, I think about the fact that it's building my stamina, and I visualize my heart, you know, getting bigger and stronger, and my lungs having more capacity. So I try to make it a visualization exercise as much as an actual exercise. So that's stamina, that's strength. The next one is suppleness, and suppleness is obviously about making sure that your bones and joints are flexible. The way I build that is by building in a warm-up and a stretching process at the beginning and end of every exercise session I do, whichever kind it is. And I also do yoga. So I have a yoga mat and I do yoga, and I focus on length and suppleness and becoming more flexible in my yoga practice. And then, and I should say, by the way, that yoga, of course, especially the kind of yoga I do, which is kind of power yoga, actually builds all of the elements of fitness, all of the elements of strength and stamina, as well as suppleness, because yoga is composed of all of those. So those are 3 of them: stamina, strength, suppleness. And then another one is serenity. This is my favorite, because serenity is the one where you get to rest. And this is actually where I would incorporate some meditation and visualization. Hi, Pathways and Possibilities. Great, thank you for being here. Nice to see you. Yeah, so serenity is where I take a day of rest every so often. So especially if you're doing strength training, you can't do that too many days in a row because it's not good for the muscles. So I make sure I build in some time to rest and relax. And for me, serenity might mean on that day, instead of doing a workout, I have a nice long hot bath, and I read something that I want to read, or I might go for a walk. Not that I don't do these things other times as well, but this is specifically time in my daily routine that I spend on this. I might meditate, I might visualize. It's just some space that I carve out where I specifically focus on being relaxed. And I find that that's really important, because one of the things I've noticed is that I'm not exactly. It's not that I'm not the kind of person who can't relax. You know, I can relax, but I'm always very busy, and I've always got things that I want to do, and there's always things that I want to be getting on with. And if I don't make time to relax, then there is a risk that I just kind of flop out in front of the television after a hard day at work, and I kid myself that I'm relaxing when really I'm just kind of vegging out. Not that there's anything wrong with vegging out, but sometimes it's good to do really conscious relaxation. So serenity built into my daily routine is one of the ways that I do that. So those are the 4 elements of fitness. And then the other thing that's part of that from the physical point of view is what I call the real food revival rules. And I wrote about them in my book, and I don't know them off by heart, unfortunately, which is terrible really, because I wrote them. I should, but I'm just going to look them up. And this is my Real Food Revival Plan book. And again, I created these so that I would have something to remind me of how to look after myself. And they're really simple, because I think that there's lots of information out there about healthy eating, but the truth is that actually there are lots of different healthy diets, and we're sometimes led into thinking by the media and others that there's only one perfect diet, and if only we found that diet we would be fine, which can be very difficult if you find that the latest thing they're saying is the healthy diet is something you just don't like. You don't like eating. So I discovered by doing lots of research and experiment on myself really, that it's actually possible to have a very varied diet tailored to your own taste and for it to still be healthy. Farah, yes, moderation is exactly it. That's the foundation of it. Moderation, including moderation in everything, including moderation. So being sure that you have fun as well as eating well. So here are the rules. These are the Real Food Revival rules, and you could apply this to any type of eating that you happen to like, unless of course you happen to like eating nothing but junk food, in which case I can't help you. So the first one, there's 5 of them. The first one is eat mainly real, whole, freshly prepared food. That's fairly simple, isn't it? The food that grows that way, fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, properly raised meats if you eat meat, fish, etc., whatever it is you like. Then for 2, for good nutrition, eat a broad and varied diet within your chosen parameters. So if you're an omnivore, then obviously that means eat all kinds of different foods, including different meats and fishes, etc., etc. If you're a vegetarian, it means eat your vegetarian food, but make sure you eat a wide range of it. If you're a vegan, it's possible to be entirely healthy as a vegan, although lots of people say, oh, veganism isn't healthy. It's just not true. It's possible to be healthy as a vegan, but the more restricted your diet becomes and the more limited, the harder you have to work and the cleverer you have to be to make sure you get all the nutrition you need. So if you're a vegan, then you would eat lots of fruits, vegetables, grains and beans, and you would make sure that you were getting enough vitamin E, you're getting enough essential oils and so on. And sometimes supplementation is necessary. Some very good books, and I recommend them in this book actually. There's one called, I can't remember the author, but it's called Vegan for Life. And it's an excellent book. If ever anyone says to me they want to become a vegan, I'm not a vegan. I've had times where I've tried veganism and it just didn't really work for me physically. But if you want to be a vegan, anyone who asks to be a vegan, I would recommend this book, Vegan for Life. It's very good. And yes, home cooking, absolutely, Farah. Then number 3, for satiety, so in other words, for feeling full, understand your appetite and eat accordingly. So that means, learn about the kind of person you are in terms of what satisfies you and what doesn't. So for me, I need to have a fairly protein-rich diet in order to feel satisfied. Other people get by on a slightly more carbohydrate-rich. So it's just about finding out what works for you. Then number 4, for weight loss, weight gain, or weight management, take control of your calorie intake. And a lot of people think you can just you know, you don't need to worry about calories if you eat certain foods or if you do a certain amount of exercise, but you do need to make sure you're not exceeding your calorie intake. And you can learn about what kind of foods are high in calories and which aren't. Yes, some really good advice in the room here. Good to choose from the rainbow on diet, absolutely. Farah, I like my fibre, that's absolutely right as well. That fills you up and it's very good for you internally as well. And it helps you keep control of your calories because it helps you to not overeat. And then for number five, to gain maximum benefit from your healthy eating plan, practice the 4 elements of fitness, which we just talked about earlier. So that's the kind of physical stuff that I like to do in terms of my daily practice. So get up, have my strong coffee, have a moment of silence, do my exercise. If I'm having breakfast, and I don't always have breakfast, eat something that's going to nourish me and that reminds me that I care for myself and care for my body, and then I can be on with my day. I've had that private victory that lets me get into my day and a good start. So hi Kendra, welcome. I will be leaving this up, so if you've missed anything at the beginning of the stream, don't worry, I'll make sure that it's up for you and you can participate in it. So that'd be great. So then number 3, so the next bit is going back to silence. So we've had daily practice, building our daily practice, we've had the 4 elements of fitness and healthy eating, and then for me, another really important part of spiritual self-care is silence. And I'll tell you a bit about my first experience of properly going into silence, because hi, your secret path, welcome. I had never done I've never done a fully silent retreat, and I had never done any kind of silent exercise until I spent some time in the Findhorn Foundation in Scotland. This was the second time I'd been there. I'd been there before for an experience week. Amazing place. If you haven't been, it's really worth checking out. It has a very interesting history of how it was formed and how it was founded by people who were really following their hearts and their spirits and their inner voice in terms of being directed in how to set this foundation up. Anyway, so I went to Findhorn for a course, a life purpose course. It was a really good course, and part of it was we got to a certain bit of it where we had to go in silence for. It ended up being, you know, from about early evening, just after dinner, all the way through until dinner the next day. So it was about 24 hours. And when the course leader said, we're going to now go into silence, and we were given little badges to wear that said, I am silent, so that people wouldn't speak to us, I thought, this is great. I'm going to, you know, have almost 24 hours of peace and quiet, and I'm going to go to my room and I'm going to read, and I'll listen to some CDs that I've brought with me, and I'll maybe do some journaling. And so I was just thinking of all the great things that I'd be able to do because nobody would be talking to me and I wouldn't have to talk to anybody. And then the course leader said, now in order to do this properly and to fully engage in the silent practice, what you need to do is not speak, not read, not listen to any music, not listen to any television, not write anything, as well as not interacting with people. And I went from feeling excited about the prospect of having this peaceful, quiet time to myself to a state of utter terror, because my mind just could not comprehend what would happen if it didn't have any of the kind of input that it was used to. And I'm not kidding, it was a visceral feeling of fear that just came up in me, and it was almost like a sense of panic. Now, nobody had a gun to my back saying you must do this, so I had absolute choice whether I engaged with this process or not. And actually, I for a minute or two I thought, oh, I'm not sure I can do it, but I thought, no, I'm going to do it. I'll take the ride. I'll just, you know, see how it goes. And so I started, and for the first hour or so, it was pretty horrific because my mind was just flying almost with panic, thinking, how am I going to get through these 24 hours? But then it began to quieten down. It just began to gradually quieten down, and I went for a walk, and I just thought, well, what can I do? All I can do really is just observe and see what, you know, let nature speak to me. Nobody else is going to be speaking to me, and I'm not speaking to anyone else. So I'll just let nature speak to me. I'll just take things in. I'll just notice what I notice. You know, yeah, absolutely. That Farah saying the monkey mind. Yes, it was just letting the monkey mind calm down, and over a few hours, it really began to settle, and I actually got into this kind of groove where it's a very strange thing to explain, but I just felt really calm, very kind of quiet, very peaceful. And eventually, I think I went and had a bath and had a very kind of sensuous, luxurious bath where I felt very aware of everything, the smell of the water and the smell of the oil in the water and the touch of the water on my skin. It was really powerful. Then I went to sleep and had a very good deep sleep, woke up in the morning, and I went out, did another walk, had breakfast in silence, surrounded by other people. And by the middle of that next day, I was in a state of such deep peace, I really did not want to come out of it. And the strange thing was, when I got to the room where we all gathered together, where we were going to come out of the silence and everyone came in, the peace in the room was just palpable. It was really, really palpable. And I had the experience of feeling a little bit as though I was slightly outside of my body. So I felt a bit like I was outside my body observing myself. And it was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. And I really didn't want to come out of the silence, but we did come out of the silence. The course leader broke the silence for us. And it was just amazing. And afterwards I said to her, she asked us how it had gone. And I said to her, well, I had this strange experience. I actually, towards the end of the silence, was in a position where I was beginning to feel as though I was outside of myself, observing myself. It was like I was watching Brian wandering around, but my consciousness was slightly just outside me. And she said, well, that's one of the things that people experience when they meditate, and that's one of the things that people are trying to get to when they meditate. And I think because I didn't know I was trying to get anywhere, it just happened spontaneously. But it was a deeply, deeply spiritual, profound, peaceful, healing experience, and one that I really value. And ever since then, I've really deeply valued silence. And I actually live not very far from a Quaker study centre here in Birmingham. I did a course there recently, and I'm not a Quaker, but the course centre is open to anyone. And I did a leadership course there recently, and silence was part of that. So every morning we spent some time in silence. And the interesting thing is that since doing that practice at Findhorn, and having had that experience, I now find that I can drop into silence at quite a deep level quite quickly. And I think that's simply because I've had the experience of being that deeply in silence before. So I really recommend it. If you get the opportunity to do a silent retreat, especially if it's a kind of a managed silent retreat, then I really recommend that as a great spiritual practice. And for me now, as I say, sometimes I'll try and take a few minutes doing silence. But the other thing that I'll try and do sometimes is, if I don't have time, I'll actually just take a few breaths, just 3 or 4 breaths in silence, and that will be fine. Crystal Irama is saying, I don't think you can be in true silence when you live in the city. That's probably true, actually. Hi Shane. That's probably true, although what I found was that my silence, once I was in it, wasn't really dependent on what was happening outside. So, to be honest with you, towards the end of that silent period, when I was feeling a little bit outside of myself, I think somebody could have come in wearing a kind of one-man band, outfit with drums and cymbals and made a heck of a lot of noise, and I don't think it would have fazed me, because the silence wasn't so much about noise, it was more about an inner experience, if that makes sense. So that's a bit about silence. Now, in terms of meditation, as well as doing silent meditation, there's a couple of other meditations that I like to do. And I'm going to see if I can just pull up something for you. So the 2 meditations that I do are the chakra meditation that was mentioned earlier. There's lots of different chakra meditations, but I find that really works well for me, because I can spend time visualizing each chakra. I'm pretty good at visualizing colors, so I imagine the color of the chakras. I go through them in order from the root chakra up to the crown chakra, and I run energy through them. And I don't even really need to know, although I do know what the different chakras mean and what they relate to. What I found is that even if you're not particularly aware of that, just the practice of visualizing this energy pulsing and growing and the wheel spinning, and light moving through your body and then cycling it through your body in a number of different ways. There's lots of different practices you can do for that. I find to be really helpful and really empowering and really calming. But it can also be very kind of energizing as well. So it's another good thing to do in the morning if you want to kind of get yourself going and get your chakras aligned. And actually, when I used to do this a bit more consistently, I need to get back into my chakra practice. I actually found myself using a chakra meditation whenever I had to go into a stressful experience. So in my day job, I'm chief executive of a charity, and I have to do quite a lot of public speaking. And I know that those of you watching this will think, well, that's probably no problem for you, Brian. But actually, I'm quite shy, and I will pat Maya's head for you. Dead cheeky says, pat Maya's head for me. I will. She's asleep in her basket downstairs, but I will go down and pat her in a bit. So, yeah, so I actually get quite nervous if I had to speak publicly, and I would do a chakra meditation before I went out on stage and actually visualize that everything was in line and everything was flowing, and it really, really helped. I've done it before job interviews, and that helped there. So whenever I needed confidence and to feel aligned with myself, I found the chakra meditation really worked well. And but also it can be used to calm us down. So I'll talk a bit more about chakras in future videos. The other meditation I like to do, and it really fits in with this idea of spiritual self-care, is the Buddhist practice of loving kindness meditation. And the reason I like it is it's simple. And for me, I feel a little bit like if we're, if you're doing all this if you're doing all this spiritual shit, as you might say, what are we doing it for? If we're not doing it in order to be kinder to ourselves, kinder to other people, kinder to the world around us, why are we doing it? I know it can be fun and all that kind of stuff, but for me, I do it because I want, I just want, I want to be able to be kinder to myself and others. So, bye, Supportive Tarot. Thanks for being here. So for me, loving kindness meditation works really well. And again, I'll do a video at some point properly on loving kindness meditation. But there is a mantra that I use sometimes, and it works really, really, really well. See you, Kaleidoscope Tarot. Thanks for being here. Bye. Bye-bye. So you can do this either for yourself or for the whole world, or you can do it for specific people. If you think of someone that you feel needs some kindness to be sent from you, then you can do this. And it's a mantra, so you would incorporate this into your meditation any way you like. A few deep breaths, let yourself relax, just take time to really kind of let the muscles in your body relax. And then the mantra, and you can repeat this inwardly or you can repeat it outwardly. Let's imagine that you were doing this for other people, maybe somebody you care about who needs help or support. The mantra would be, may they be well, may they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be at peace, may they be free from pain and suffering. And of course, you can change that to yourself. So may I be well, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be at peace, may I be free from pain and suffering. And one of the ways I like to do it is, because sometimes it feels a bit like you're playing favourites if you pick somebody or if you just direct it to yourself. I sometimes like to say all. And when I say all, I mean all the people in my life that I love and care about, and all the people in the world that need help, the world itself, the planet. And so that way it would be, hi Katie, nice to see you. In that sense, the mantra would go, may all be well, may all be happy, may all be healthy, may all be at peace, may all be free from pain and suffering. And just repeating that inwardly or outwardly is just a really calming thing to do. And I think if you're anything like me, I suspect even hearing those words now probably has made some of you feel just a little bit calmer inside, because as I say them, I can feel my body just relaxing. I can feel the tension going out of my shoulders. So it's very powerful, and I think that when it comes to spiritual practices, one of the things that I remind myself is that sometimes it's the simplest spiritual practices that are the most powerful. And that's really good news, because that means that, technically speaking, theoretically speaking, that should make them easier to do. If they're simple, and if they're clear, and if they're direct, then it should be easier for us to incorporate them into our lives. And so when people say to me, I'm struggling a bit with my spiritual self-care, I'm struggling a bit with my practice, the first thing I recommend to them is to stop and think what they found simplest and easiest, because often they'll find that the things they found simplest and easiest are also the things that had the biggest impact and the deepest impact. So that's a bit about silence. So, excuse me, I'll have a sip. It's Thursday work going live. Normally I can talk, I can stop and pause and then edit. Now I'm just like, oh, I'm live, I've got to keep speaking. So the last bit, so we've talked about building a daily practice. We've talked about the 4 elements of fitness and the real food revival rules. We've talked about silence. And the last of my 4 things that I wanted to talk about, nobody here is playing her singing bowl. I bet that sounds absolutely gorgeous. Thank you very much, Annika. That's lovely. Yeah, so the last thing I want to talk about, my fourth category of things actually, is the 2 things together, intention and intuition. And the intention part for me, this is where practices like visualization and goal setting and some parts of magical practice come in for me, because this has always been an interesting thing for me, because my worldview is becoming increasingly aligned with a kind of non-dualist, kind of Buddhist, Zen, Taoist worldview. Not that I'm necessarily particularly Zen all the time, I'm not claiming that for myself, I'm just saying that that's a worldview that really resonates with me. And so that's often kind of associated with being a bit goalless, and just letting things be, and just letting things happen and unfold. And that can be great, and that can be very a very good thing to do, and a very calming thing to do. But it's also sometimes important for us to set goals and to have intentions so that we can move ourselves forward. And so my intention setting tends to be based around trying to get clear about what my goals are, writing them down, making sure that I've got them written down, and then looking at how I can kind of empower and energize those goals. And that might be by doing a magical ritual. I practice magic as a solitary practitioner, so I don't do ceremonial magic or anything, but you could obviously do that kind of thing. Maybe do some kind of ritual, maybe do something on the altar. You know, behind me at the moment I've got my honeybee card from the green I've got it here, the Green Wheel Oracle, which I've walked through on my channel before. And the reason I've got that one there is that I'm in a process at the moment. Yes, Elaine has pointed out it's a new moon tonight, great for intention setting, absolutely. Well, the reason I've got that there is that I'm actually very busy at the moment. I've got lots of ideas that I'm trying to work out in terms of what I do next with this channel, and in terms of my coaching work and my writing and so on. And so the B is about being industrious and actually getting things going. So that's why that's there. So maybe having something on the altar that represents your intention. And for me, that's what intention setting is about. It's just about kind of being clear about what you want and then finding a way of honouring that. And if you're into things like the law of attraction, then that would be the place for some of that. I tend to think there's a lot of value in some of the work around the law of attraction, but I also find myself thinking, I struggle a bit with the idea of, I can't remember what the quote is, but there's a really good quote from Quentin Crisp, who is this very kind of flamboyant English character who was the subject of the TV series The Naked Civil Servant, a very fascinating man. And he said something like he found it difficult to believe in a God that would move heaven and earth in order to provide him with a new 10-speed racing bike for his birthday. So the idea that you visualize for things that you want, and then everything kind of comes about as a result of that. I tend not to think in those ways. So I tend to set my intentions more around the way I can be in the world. What can I give to the world? How can I behave in the world? How can I care for myself, and how can I care for others? But whatever your intention setting is, that could be one side of your practice there. And then the other side of it for me is about intuition. And intuition, of course, it's about learning to listen to yourself at a very deep level, learning to understand when you are aligned with your true purpose and your true heart, if you like. And tarot really comes into that for me. That's one of the ways I use tarot and divination. That's when I'll pull cards, when I need to reflect on where I'm going and what I need to know, and maybe I need to ask myself some questions. And the way I read tarot very often actually is that I see the cards coming to me, not so much with answers, but sometimes with empowering questions. And in fact, we're going to do something with empowering questions just shortly, because before I close, I'm going to pull some cards for you all. So I see the tarot coming with empowering questions that help me clarify things. And other types of divination like the I Ching and so on, I find really useful for that. And I'll also sometimes use, I'll try and get in touch with my intuition through the meditation process I spoke about earlier, and being in silence. And sometimes I find that being in silence is a really good way for insights to have space to come alive and to make themselves known. So the monkey mind is quietened down enough that things begin to come up. So that's one of the things that I like to do. So that really is that's the side of things that for me are about intention and intuition and magic. And I've been thinking a lot recently about magic and magical practice. And I think I'm actually going to do a bit of a series on my view on magic, because I don't follow a particular magical denomination, but I'm interested in magic as a kind of both as a psychological model, or more accurately as a psycho-spiritual model, and as a way of being in the world, and as a way of aligning our intentions and our intuition and our practices, etc., etc. So I'm thinking about putting together a series on that. So if I'll see whether people would be interested in that, and then I'll maybe put together some ideas. So those are my spiritual self-care ideas. Build a daily practice. Practice the 4 elements of fitness and real food revival rules so that my body is fit and healthy. Spend time in silence, just listening and meditating. Set my intention and be in touch with my intuition. And then pulling all that together is really what the spiritual practice is about. That's what my spiritual practice is about. How you pull all of that together. So before we go on, I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat room to see. Yeah, Wendy's Tarot Journey says, for me, law of attraction is attract, but put it into action. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's not about just sitting there waiting for things to happen. It's about, what do I want? What do I need to do in order to make those things more possible? And then what actions do I need to take? That's really good. Hi, Christine and Celeste. Hi, Una. Hi, Sacred Space Japan. I spotted you come in earlier, and I meant to say hello, but I was in full flow, so I didn't. Okay. Oh, Crystal Rama, anything you want to talk about, we'll be interested. Okay, just wait until my video series on Olivia Newton-John's records from the 1970s and 1980s, including the singles that should have been released but weren't. I'll work on that, and then you'll be sorry you asked for me to talk about anything. Let's just have a quick look. Okay, so yeah, I think probably we're at the point now where I could do a little bit of reading for you all. And what I'm going to do is I've actually got 4 different decks here. Why do one deck when you can have 4, eh? And I'm going to take my ring off because then it's easier to shuffle. I'm going to draw 4 cards, one from each deck. and I'll tell you what each one's about. But before I do, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to just think about what you would like to connect with at the moment, whether you've got a particular issue that you're dealing with in your life, whether you want to know something generally about what's going on for you, if you'd like to know something about your own spiritual practice. Whatever it is, I just would invite you to hold it in your mind and in your heart and just think about that thing. And I'm going to draw you a card from, first of all, from the Naked Heart Tarot. I did a walkthrough of this recently. Beautiful deck. I love it very much. And this card is going to speak to us about the theme of this reading. And, you know, so I invite you, whatever the card is, you know, we're going to do that thing of whatever card comes up, we're going to go with it. So just bear in mind what it is you want to know more about, and we'll see what comes out. And this is about the theme that you most need to know about. Okay. So these are pretty well shuffled, and I shuffled them earlier as well. So let's just cut the deck. So we have got the Youth of Swords. I hope you can see that. I hope the light is such that you can see it. Let me just tilt that way. There we are, the Youth of Swords. And of course, the Youth of Swords in this deck relates to the Page of Swords. So there's something there for me, certainly, about new ideas and about fresh thinking and about being kind of prepared to be discerning. Discernment actually is something that I didn't talk about, but it is an important spiritual practice, and I will make a video on discernment shortly. But being discerning about how we handle ourselves and how we handle our practices and what we make of them. So that's our first card, the Youth of Swords from the Naked Heart Tarot. Then the next one I want to pull for you is an ally card, and this is going to be a card that you can carry with you in your mind and in your heart in relation to your spiritual practices. And I'm drawing this from the majors only of the Medicine Woman Tarot. And I picked the majors because they actually operate a bit like a little mini oracle deck, and they've all got really powerful, clear messages. So this is the ally that you're going to be taking with you. And again, I invite you, whatever card comes up, I invite you to just take it in and consider in what way this could be an ally for you. Farah is saying she wants someone to do her housework. If you find somebody to do your housework, then send them over here to do mine as well, because I'm still looking. Okay, so now we've got a jumper. So I'm taking the jumper. We're going to have two allies because one came popping out. So that was the jumper, and here is the card that we are choosing. Lovely. So we have got, now this is the card that jumped out. Harvest, which is the Wheel of Fortune. So something there, of course, about reaping what we sow, which is so appropriate for spiritual self-care, because, you know, any kind of self-care, but certainly in spiritual self-care, there more than almost anywhere else, we certainly reap what we sow, don't we? So there we are. Somewhere in Time Tarot, hi, welcome. And then the other ally we've got, just so we can be absolutely clear that we get things done in a powerful way, is the Chariot, the Warrior. And this makes my heart happy because the Chariot card is my birth card, number 7 of the Major Arcana. So those are our two allies. I think they're pretty good allies to have. The Wheel of Fortune, Harvest, and the Chariot, Warrior. Okay, so that is your ally cards. And then the third card I want to pull, well, it's actually going to be the fourth because we've got two there. The third is from a new deck, or newish deck that I've got, which isn't actually a tarot deck, and it isn't an oracle deck even. Well, it's a kind of oracle deck, I suppose, but it's actually more specifically the self-compassion deck. And I probably will do a bit of a, I probably won't do a walkthrough of this because it's not visual, it's like different self-compassion practices. But I will talk about it in a future video. But what I'm going to do here is just pick a self-compassion practice, and again invite you to consider how you might incorporate this practice in your life, perhaps in the week ahead. Okay, so self-compassion. This is thankless job. Talk about housework. We were talking about housework. So here's the advice for thankless jobs. Maybe no one else will show their appreciation, but you still can. Take just a moment and write yourself a note of gratitude for something you did for you. So I am going to take this as an indication that I should write a note of gratitude to myself for having done the housework this weekend. And if you've done your housework as well, I think you should do the same. And if any of you are particularly good at doing housework, you should let the rest of us know, and then we'll hire you out to come and do everyone's housework. And I think we have got a real business idea there. So that is our question card, our self-compassion card. And then finally, the last card I want to do is from a deck that I have walked through in the past, and that is the Empowering Questions cards. And I mentioned earlier that for me, one of the important and powerful things that tarot can do is bring questions to me. So I often think about each of the cards and what questions they might be asking me. But this is a deck actually of empowering questions. So, oh, somewhere in time, Tarot, waiting to go into a family funeral. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay. Okay, so, well, hopefully this is useful for you, and if you missed anything at the beginning, you can look back as well, and all the best to you. So, for our empowering question, we have got, okay, so think about the issue you're dealing with at the moment. Think about what maybe is troubling you, think about where you need guidance. Here is the empowering question. What does my instinct say I should do next? What does my instinct say I should do next? So I'd invite you to consider that. I would just add a slight proviso that what you do there, what I would do with that question, is consider what my instinct is saying I should do next. And I'd remind myself that I don't have to do it. And that is an empowering thing. So allowing yourself, when you think about what your instinct is telling you, to then look at that thing and think, okay, well, let's look at the pros and cons. And you might find that it's something that resonates with you so strongly, you just say, yes, that is exactly what I need to do. Or you might find that you need a bit more time to think it through. Una's saying, what if one doesn't have instincts? Well, see, I would say, I think we all have instincts, but they maybe all show up in different ways. And but you're right to ask the question, because of course some people, you know, won't necessarily have a strong feeling one way or the other, and they won't get an instant sense. And for me, that just simply means that you might need to find other ways of ascertaining a course of action. And we've talked a bit earlier in the video about some of the things that you could do. So some people maybe work less from instinct and they need time to think things through. So journaling might help, writing lists of pros and cons. I find that I'm quite an airy person, quite a mental person. Lots of air in my astrology birth chart, and yeah, I'm you know, just an airy all the way through, Gemini. And what I find useful to do if I'm struggling with something and struggling to make a decision is to write lists of pros and cons, and that helps me sort of kick through things. So I'm seeing in the chat room somewhere in time saying that at the funeral was an older family member lived a long life to 90, had a wonderful life. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. That, I think, my friends, is my spiritual self-care video. I've more or less said everything I need to say. And before I run out of voice, I'm probably going to stop. And also, we're almost at exactly an hour's worth of live streaming, which I'm kind of amazed at, because I didn't think I'd get to an hour. And I think we've got 37 people watching now, which is more than I thought we would ever have in a million years. So I'm really pleased you could all join me. Before I do go, I would say that I am still very much in the middle of my, not in the middle, but I'm near the end now actually, of my Tarot to the Nines series, where I've been looking at tarot through the lens of numerology and sacred geometry and all kinds of things like that. I still need to do a video on the court cards and everything, and a few people have been asking me, you know, now that I've done this series, will I be putting it behind a paywall? And the answer to that is no. No, I'm not going to put it behind a paywall. The Tarot to the Nine series is my gift to the community who've been so welcoming to me, and I've had so much fun making it, and you know, you've all participated in it so enthusiastically. I'm going to leave it up there. I want it to be there for anyone to engage in who's interested and wants to learn more. So that's the answer to that. It will be up there for as long as YouTube exists, and so yeah, I need to think about what I'm going to do next after that. So thank you all for being here again, and I look forward to catching up with you the next time I do a live, and I might do a few non-live before then. Take care everyone, have a good night or morning or afternoon or day or whatever time it is with you. All the best. Bye.